Welcome to Power Query. Well, it's not actually called Power Query anymore since Excel 2016. Prior to that, so in 2010 and 2013, it existed as a COM add-in, and you had to download, install, activate, etc. However, now, from 2016, it's built into the Excel interface. It's also been given a slightly different name, which is Get and Transform. Now, if we go to the data ribbon, now for the moment I'm using this working file which is actually empty, has two sheets, and it's called Sample Query. On the data ribbon, we have a whole new section here called Get and Transform. So this is the new name in 2016 for what was previously called Power Query and involved a long process of downloading and installing. Well, thank you for telling us that, Guy, but just what is this Get and Transform? As it says, it allows you to get data from an external source, transform that data without amending the original. This is just transforming what is being pulled into Excel, and then save that information in Excel and manipulate it. Charts, pivot tables, filtering, sorting, anything really that you can do with normal data that you would have in Excel. The advantages is that the data can stay in its original source, which might be on a web page, might be in a database of many types of descriptions, might be just in another Excel file or a number of Excel files, because one of the powers of Get and Transform is to merge data to manipulate it together as a single data source. Let's have a little overview of the mechanics. So to use Get and Transform, you obviously must have some external data ready that you want to make use of. You then come to New Query on the ribbon, and we come down the list of options. Is the data in a file somewhere? And you can see in the pop-out, those files could be an Excel file, it could be in a CSV file, it could be an XML file, it could be a plain text file, or we even have the ability to get data from a whole folder. Now that's really quite clever and very powerful, and we'll explore that in due course. Or we could be connecting to the information in a database, from a SQL Server database, from a Microsoft Access database, or from SQL Server Analysis Services database. So there are online databases, or perhaps within a corporation, that you might want to connect to. We have other sources. So from the web, we can connect to data that is displayed on a web page and make use of that in Excel. From OData feed, so this is a particular type of data feed from Facebook. There is a third-party plugin that allows you to connect to Facebook data. From any ODBC connection, so Open Database Connectivity, anything that you have the driver for to connect to Excel's Get Power can do that. Or we can start with a blank query, and you'll see shortly what that means by a blank query when we visit the query editor. We then have further options here for combining queries by either merging them or appending one query to another, or launching again the query editor ourselves. And we have query options and data source settings, which we will explore shortly. For the moment, I just want to demonstrate connecting with the Get and Transform to an Excel workbook, for example. We need to then find the workbook. Well, it's in your working files, and we'll choose the Contacts workbook, and we click Import. Now, whenever you connect to an external data source, the first stage is to be presented with the navigator window, which we have here, that allows you to choose which part of the data you want to use. So in the case of an Excel workbook, you get to choose which sheet or which table. In a database, you would get to choose which table or which views, and you can select multiple items. Obviously, we're just connecting to a workbook that only has a single sheet, so there's not much to choose from here, but there could be quite a list if it was a large workbook or a large database. We need to choose which part of the data we are interested in. We then get a small preview of that data on the right here, so I can see some of the information that is in that workbook. And then I have, well, three options really. One is to cancel, one is to edit, and that will take us into the query editor, which we will see shortly. And then one is to load, and there are two load options, load or load to. Load to allows you to choose a particular table or sheet. If it's just going in the current sheet, which is behind us here, you can just simply use load. Now, rather than just use load, I'm going to just quickly choose edit, which will again launch a separate window here called the query editor. Now, you can see here there are a lot of options, and we're going to explore most of these options as we move through this particular lesson. For the moment, I'm happy just to show you the query editor. The data is displayed in the middle, so you can see the data, and on the right we have applied steps. So at the moment we've chosen our source, we've navigated and chosen the data. The headers have been selected for us. You can see the headers have already been chosen, so we didn't have to do that. And we're effectively ready to roll. Now there are lots we can do in here. We could, for example, just as a demonstration, hide the middle column. So I could choose the middle column there and remove column. The choice is to remove this column or remove all the other columns. So I just want to remove this column. Now that doesn't remove it from the source data. It still exists in the original Excel file, but it's going to remove it from my result. And once I've finished editing, and you'll see other things we can do in here when we explore it, I simply choose close and load. Again, it has two options. Close and load will place it in this sheet. Close and load to will allow us to choose where we want the result to go to. So it might be a different sheet or a particular table. Let's just say close and load. And the data is then pulled in to a table. Notice the middle name is missing here because I've asked it to be removed from my get control. And because there's quite a bit of data, it's going to take a little while to load it in. There are actually 74,032 rows. Now that they're all loaded, we can see that this is really just an Excel table. We have the Table Tools Design option at the top here, and everything we've done with tables can be done with this data. The only difference is this data is not actually stored in Excel. It's stored in the external data source. You also get another sub-ribbon here, the Query Tools one, which allows you to refresh the data, because if anything happens to the source data, you'd need to refresh this to see if anything's changed. Allows us to delete our query effectively, or we can choose Edit, which will take us back in to the query editor, and I could make further changes. So the steps are, well, fairly straightforward. Step one is to choose a sheet, choose the data ribbon, choose new query, choose where you're getting the data from. So what are you connecting to? Let's do a quick one from an Access database. You have an Access database in your working folders called Employees. You're then presented with the Navigator. The Navigator shows available data objects. So in this case, we have tables and queries, tables and views in the database. So I might want to connect to Employees. Preview is shown on the right, and then we can have a load directly into Excel or click Edit, take us into the query editor. In the query editor, we can do a variety of things yet to be explored, and then we close and load to load a copy of the data into Excel, which is loaded into a table to allow us to then do all the table options that we want. We can create charts, we can filter, we can hide, we can query as much as we would like. So now I have two lots of data in my single Excel workbook. On the right, I can see them in this workbook queries little window that's opened up. Two queries, one for achieved employees, that's 99 rows, and one for contacts, that's 74,000 rows. You can see when I hover, I get information about each of the queries. So that's the basics of Get and Transform, which effectively is the renamed Power Query from previous versions of Excel. Let's get on and see what else we can do with this tool.